Summertime is here. It's a nice warm day. It's in its 80s. Pretty dry. We had a lot of rain this last couple of days, and I believe we'll have a lot more rain this week. So everything's got all green since you've been out here last. And today's going to be a quick one, a quick video. Basically answering a question. Bob and I have been doing these John Thread 670 builds where we turn them into Husqvarna 268s or 372s, and we call them a 672 in jest, I guess. And that's what this saw is. It has a aftermarket top end. I believe it came out of a Mako box, but God only knows where it was built. You know, you can pull out of a brand like Mako, you can get parts from multiple sources. This one here is an OEM top end that I blended with a 266, and I also plugged it. What I mean by that is I plugged the decomp port just to take a variable out. The John Thread saw has a squish of about 22 thousandths. Now this one here is one of those saws where it's a good thing I checked the squish before I made any changes. I know this is a bit of a segue talking about squish 2 seconds into a video, but I had to build this one with a standard base gasket because squish as it was stock was about 31 thousandths. So that's where it is now, because taking out the gasket would have made it a little bit too tight for my liking. Other than that, it's pretty much all OEM parts, nothing aftermarket. This one here is basically a standard 372 build with a base gasket and everything, so it's as close to stock as you're going to do. And it's just wrapped with John Thread plastic, 2165 plastic. But other than that, this represents the 372 old style, not X-Torque chassis, and it's a fresh build with a fresh piston, and should be pretty representative of those saws. And what I wanted to do today is answer the question, what do you get between the 272 series and the 372 in terms of power? And the second question is, what do you get with an OEM top end versus an aftermarket top end? So you have two questions in play here. And I think these three saws are representative enough to give you an idea whether it's even worth talking about. Now this thing right here, missing its fuel cap, is a 272 that has a muffler mod and has been mildly ported. The transfer port has been modified, the intake port has been modified. Not radically, but enough to make a difference. And believe it or not, last time I ran that saw, it was about a match of a build such as that 372 standard. So those four saws, time cuts, basically to answer the question. I still have a little bit of that test log left, and since we've done a bunch of videos on that log, I will continue to use it as long as I can, because then you can go back and look at those other videos to get you know, an idea on how these saws compare to the past timed runs I've done with the other saws. The diameter of that log is getting bigger, so when we were over here somewhere, it probably had 10% less log to cut than I do now, and plus the properties change with the temperature and moisture, so it's not a direct comparison, it's an order of magnitude comparison. I had saws on this log at the beginning, they were getting like 8.5 second cuts. I would say that would be analogous to 9.5 second cuts down here, for those who want to go back to the old videos and see. And I think last time I ran the stock 372 build on the test log we're going to cut here, it was like in the 12 second range, 11 second range, just as a a reference. You know, I have one other comparison I can mix in here. The Jonsered 670 with the 272 top end right now has a loop of that new Forester chain. So I think what I'm going to do is start with that saw first, make a couple of cuts with that chain, and then swap it to a Husqvarna brand chain. Okay, it's going to get the Husqvarna chain now and see if that makes any difference. Well, that ought to answer that question right there. Well, I only made one cut. That was the chain that came off. I had bought that from Forester. It's their new chain, and had put a new Husqvarna brand chain on the same saw, same bar, so we could get a direct comparison. And just by the way it felt, it felt like it cut a lot better with this one. So, you know, that's for you guys to decide. One thing I do know is that these outboard clutch saws, now, while they may keep the heat away from the cases because the clutch is out here, but with that sprocket on the inside, it's a bit more of a hassle to work in the field and change bar and chains. You know, it's not bad, it's just more of a hassle as compared to the 372 series that have an inboard clutch. Changing bar and chains on that is just a snap. Next is I'm going to put that same bar and chain I have here on this saw, make a couple of cuts. That's going to be a comparison between an aftermarket top end and basically a cleaned up OEM with a new piston. That's OEM Husqvarna 272 top end with a new Husqvarna piston. This one here was a bit of an interesting saw because it has, you really can't tell, but it has two coils, and the top cover is different than the later model saws, and the muffler is shorter as well. I had a question from one of the fellows on that, and the reason why I can't upgrade the muffler size and the covers is because the hole pattern for the covers is different on these two coil ignition system saws than it is on the single coil ignition systems, the later model ones. That front screw, I don't know if I got the camera on it, but that front screw right there is in a slightly different position on a two coil system. It's actually a little further forward on these older saws. Up next is the 266 with exactly the same bar and chain as that last cut on the 672 or the 670 Jonsered. let that cool for a second, then put that same bar and chain on the 372 build and see what we get with that saw. One of the differences that I think is significant between the older 272 series, 268, 272 in that class, and the newer 372 series is this clutch arrangement. And there's all kinds of reasons why they did what they did. But the inboard clutch, while it may put more heat into the chassis, gives me a lot more access to the sprocket to change that if I need to, but also just changing bar and chains. Whereas the outboard clutch, while it may take the heat and keep it away from the cases, that may be true, but it's a lot more of a pain in the ass. I'm sorry, it's a lot more of a hassle to change the sprocket and the bar and chain. I happen to like this much better. I think that's a huge upgrade for user friendliness. But I'm putting this very same chain, which is Husqvarna brand chain and bar that I used on the 266 and that last series of cuts on the 372 top end cases. It's actually 365 cases, I believe. Hudzel muffler. It does have a base gasket, stock carburetor. It's a stock Walbro, and it's wrapped in John's Red plastic. 2165. And since it has a base gasket, the only thing non-standard on this saw is that Hudzel muffler right there. Other than that, it's pretty much a standard build, and I think would represent the 372 series stock quite well. Not an X-Torque. Well, one thing I can tell you is it's a lot smoother than all those other saws. As far as the times are concerned, I'll let the clock decide that for you. It feels stronger, being a 372 it should. That's a nice saw. And I've got a few hours on it now, and it's breaking in nice too. That's a strong saw right there as well. Alright, this is the modified 272. That's a strong saw right there. It vibrates more than that 372, but I bet it's got more ass. Well, this is actually an interesting saw right here, because the game plan with this was to try to make it match a stock 372 with some minor changes. I think we did exactly that, but I think the times will have to show that. But the way it feels in hand is it's got more torque than the 372 does, but it's got more compression as well. So there you have it. I'll go back and stick together a video and try to quantify those times. And again, this was several comparisons. Aftermarket cylinder versus OEM, Forester chain versus the Husqvarna brand, and a 272 pretty much stock configuration versus a 372 pretty much stock configuration. And this animal right here to close off the day, which is a mildly modified 272 XP And the goal of this exercise was to make it match stock 372. So.